Christopher Nolan says directing James Bond film would be an amazing privilege. The influence of those movies on my filmography is embarrassingly apparent. The Oppenheimer filmmaker said in a recent review. We've got to discuss this. Okay, David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. Boy, we've got to peel away the layers. First of all, pretty big news. Christopher Nolan, you know him and love him for a lot of different films. I don't know what, the Batman series, Inception, Oppenheimer now. And he was recently interviewed, and we've got to share this information because I'm going to sort of debate two conflicting sides of how I feel about this news, and I'd love to get your opinion as well. First of all, Christopher Nolan is sharing his admiration for the James Bond franchise and why it should be an amazing privilege to direct a film of 007. I mean, when you mention directing something or being a part of anything is a privilege, it's a pretty lofty, hollow title. While speaking with host Josh Horowitz on a recent episode of the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, the Oppenheimer director admitted he would gladly accept the opportunity if presented at the right moment. This is where I talk about peeling the layers, because what do we think Christopher Nolan meant about at the right moment? Well, first of all, it's got to be right for him. It's got to be, the parameters have got to be working for him. And right moment also means availability. Does Christopher Nolan have some availability right now? According to sources, he does. He has a couple of projects that he's overlapping on right now, but soon to be looking for his next project. Let's continue. The influence of those movies, says Christopher Nolan, on my filmography is embarrassingly apparent, and so there's no attempt to shy away from that. I love the films, Nolan said. You know, it would be an amazing privilege to do one. So this has been a long fantasy, imagination of taking all of his skills and his love of movies and tying it to a James Bond movie. He acknowledges that in a public way. The fact that he's embedded James Bond themes and opportunities into a lot of the films that he does means that he's paying homage. He's got a wonderful respect, almost an honorable respect for the world of James Bond. And I'm going to talk about that when I start to share my opinion. Let's continue. The filmmaker did note, and this is important, that when you take on a character or project like the iconic British spy franchise, you're working within a particular set of restraints. Actually, he said constraints. And much approach it with a right attitude. So here's where Christopher Nolan's putting on the brakes. He says constraints, restraints, to me they're the same things. What limitations is he going to have in creating the vision around his own James Bond film? Well, we know it could be Eon, who has an incredible sense of control over their property and their IP. And the other thing is, taking on the legendary character wouldn't be anything new for the Oscar-nominated director, as he brought Christian Bale's Batman to life in the Dark Knight trilogy. But if you took on James Bond, you could argue, Nolan explained that he would need to be allotted some creative freedom throughout the project. Look, all these roads are leading to the fact that clearly he had a conversation that made him say, this may not be 100% owned by Christopher Nolan. In other words, Christopher Nolan is not having the empowerment that he needs to pay off this movie. So, what does he say about that? You wouldn't want to take on a film not fully committed to what you bring to the table creatively. So as a writer casting everything, it's a full package, he said. You'd have to be really needed. You'd have to be really wanted in terms of bringing the totality of what you bring to the character. Otherwise, I'm very happy to be first in line to see whatever they do. Here comes the big aha moment I have found. Nolan previously revealed in a 2017 interview with Playboy that he has kept in contact with producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson over the years and would definitely be down to take on a film in the hit franchise. always deeply love the character, and I'm always excited to see what they do with it. He said, in the meantime, maybe one day that would work out. You'd have to be needed. Second time they're saying that. It has to be needing of reinvention. It has to need you, and they're getting along very well. Okay, that's the information I wanted to serve up as part of this discussion about Christopher Nolan, to share the debate that is going on in my head. And I'm just curious if you're thinking these things too with this potential. First of all, we've got to unwrap that even though the powers that be at Eon have had a conversation with Chris Nolan, it sounds like the disconnect that they could have had, or they do have right now, is the fact that they want to retain all the power like they've done in other Bond films that have come out. They've really steered the ship as far as storyline, actors, where it takes place, all those integers. But with Chris Nolan, he's not that guy. He's not going to be the guy that says, oh, I'll compromise it to the studios or I'll compromise it to the owners. He is without compromise. And it's because of that that Chris Nolan's films feel very different. They have a certain texture, a certain feel, a certain emotion connected to them, and certainly a certain style that only Chris Nolan can bring. If you start to tweak that with the powers that be or an old formula, does it thwart the very excellence that Christopher Nolan brings? And it starts a little bit of a capsizing the whole theory of having Christopher Nolan being a good thing, because I don't want any director that feels compromised, that feels like they're under constraints. We want them feeling loose, because in some ways they need to reinvent the character. The last one, he died, right? He exploded. So now we have an opportunity. What's Christopher Nolan going to bring to that if he's compromised on the other end? The other thing I'll flip to the debate side is, but hold on a second, David. If you weren't happy with No Time to Die, which I wasn't, I don't think that's a secret, wouldn't I want somebody as strong and empowering as Christopher Nolan to come in, who has shown success and who doesn't compromise the change or the way of things, to come in here and really put his stamp on James Bond by creating a Christopher Nolan James Bond movie? Because I know he's not going to compromise. He's not going to allow producers to come in there and go, oh, I'm sorry. No. We need to have it go this way. He's not going to allow an actor to make significant production decisions like they did in the Daniel Craig arc. I'm just saying. Christopher Nolan, whoever they pick for James Bond, is the star of the movie. And I want to dwell on that, because not a lot of people are talking about that. Christopher Nolan is like hiring a Steven Spielberg or a Martin Scorsese. The director is the reason why people are coming butts in seats. They're saying, are you going to see the new Chris Nolan movie? What's it called? Oppenheimer. Are you going to see the new Christopher Nolan movie? What is it? Well, it's the third Batman. So Christopher Nolan has become a draw and an entity. It's a marketing push. It's similar to a Hans Zimmer score. When they were announced that Hans Zimmer was going to do the score of No Time to Die, people said, oh, Hans Zimmer score. It has an identity to it. It has a brand to it. And Christopher Nolan is no difference. So because he is sort of the star of Bond 26, would he eclipse whoever James Bond is? He very well could be, unless you got like a Henry Cavill. But chances are, if it's Christopher Nolan, you're going to have someone like, well, he could go in a lot of different directions. But one of the directions is that he is the star. So you'd have to consider that. And I don't know if I want that. And I'll tell you why. This is where it gets crazy. And please, in the comments, share your opinion. My favorite Bond films are the ones where I'm fine with if Bond is a star and puts butts in seats. But honestly, the director is certainly a capable director, very functional. Terrence and Peter and all these people, certainly Martin Campbell. Why am I calling these people by their first names? I don't know them. They don't know me. But to me, they are incredibly competent, but they don't need to have their own signature. Bond James Bond is the signature. The tropes, the story, the exhilaration, the escapism, the positive hero winning in the end. Those are all the things that I think are the core and the star of the movie. So I'm not sitting here tapping the desk going, you know what James Bond needs right now? They need a good dose of Christopher Nolan. I don't know why I turned it into a Southern gentleman, but there I did it. I don't think that's what it needs. I think what James Bond needs is to go back to basics. We have been revisiting a lot of the anniversary movies as of late. That's what we have, our 25 movies, so that's what we go back to. And I've been enjoying From Russia with Love. I've been enjoying Live and Let Die, and I've been enjoying Octopussy. And the one thing those all do is they allow my brain to relax and escape, and they take me along for the ride. And at the end of them, I feel rejuvenated, rejoicing. And what is another word that I can use? Renewed. Told you I get one, frickin' thesaurus. But I do feel that way, and that's what I think we need to go back to. It's not, I think it needs to be a Chris Nolan injection. And Christopher Nolan, look, I love me a Chris Nolan movie. I've seen them all. I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, but I'm going to. I've heard great things. He doesn't make bad movies, and they're all thoughtful. And I've got a seriousness, but then they got a little tinge of humor, and just at the right spots. And the characters are really brought out, and they've got the great twists and turns. And can I imagine an amazing James Bond movie that's a Christopher Nolan movie? Hell yes. Of course, anybody could. Would I be unhappy if Christopher Nolan was announced as the director? Absolutely not. It would be there. But I would want Christopher Nolan to take his love of James Bond, the very reason that he gives it so much deference, almost like a hollowed deference, and apply it to his movie. Don't think about, I need to have this signature piece and this signature moment and this signature sound. Say at the heart of it, I need to build a foundational story that gets back to the things that young Christopher Nolan, in all his glory, fell in love with. I need to find the reason why people love Bond and keep going back to Bond. And that is the core and the foundation of this Christopher Nolan movie. Then, once you've established that, you can start applying the layers of the individual director's signature. Everybody has one. Every director has a signature move or look or style or feel or whatever it is. Then you can start applying those different layers to it. So going back to the beginning premise of this whole video, number one, I would not be deflated if it was a Christopher Nolan movie, but I don't need it to be a Christopher Nolan movie. It's not something I crave, unless, of course, Christopher Nolan takes his fandom of James Bond and does what we do. We internalize it, and then we project it. And if he's willing to project all the reasons that he fell in love with James Bond to begin with all its warts, all its bumps and bruises, because James Bond ain't perfect, and that's what we love about him. He's a fallible anti-hero. He's not a Boy Scout, and he's a little diversive, and that's fine. Diversive? Divisive? I'll look it up later. I want all that. And he should want all that as a fan. And I'm not saying he's going to have to fight the producers for that, but he should be a strong enough choice and director that he can put his own signature, the James Bond signature on that, and the producers should embrace that. And maybe that's why, who knows, things have not progressed past conversations with the producers. It's all speculation. Now, I'm going to add one other thing to this video that I haven't discussed, is do I think this is actually going to happen? Right? I mean, look, everything's a speculation until it's an official announcement. We have fun with speculation. It's all we have. This is why we create events, so we can go and see each other in person and speculate together and guess and do videos like this. But do I think it's going to be Chris Nolan as a director? I don't. And you know, I always try to attribute a percentage to this. I think there is maybe a 10 to 15% chance that it'll be Christopher Nolan. I don't think it's going to be, because I think the producers will go to a director who can launch something brand new, who they want to control how many movies this person's a part of. And I think that Christopher Nolan, since he loves trilogies, would want to do something that isn't just a one-off movie. I think he'd want to do a series of movies. Number one, I don't know if the producers want to go that route. They have gone that route before, but it hasn't been planned out that way. They haven't said to a director of a film, you're going to do X amount. I don't believe. So there's that. And then the other thing is, I think Christopher Nolan really wants to do, I think he has. If I know Christopher Nolan like I do, and I don't, I think he has a James Bond movie or two already in his head. I think he has an entire arc of like 2 or 3 movies in his head, much probably like we do, where he's got the bad guys, he's got the core, he's got how it moves apart. I think he's got a great finger in the pulse of what people want from an action movie. So I think he's got those action moments. I think he's got the characters. And I dare say he may even have like a Cillian Murphy chosen in his mind of the type of actor he wants. Could I see Cillian Murphy as Bond? Wouldn't be my top 10. But would I spit on it? Absolutely not. I'd embrace it. So I think he's got something built, but I think the producers also have a very strong idea of what they want it to be. The question that pulls me into a line of saying, I don't think it's going to happen is, I don't know how much those two visions are going to align together. I really do believe Eon is a very strong entity. And rightfully so, they've controlled their IP, they've controlled the projection and the inertia of Bond and the franchise very tightly. And because of that, I think they're going to want a director that is, for want of a better term, and I know this is almost insulting, but compliant. You know, somebody that wants to get on board, certainly, put their own DNA on it, fingerprints, of course, but that also is going to be compliant and really work with the producers hand in hand, and they're storytellers. Now, the best directors are good storytellers. I think Christopher Nolan would come with a story. But then you've got Purvis Wade, you've got all these other storytellers that may insert themselves. Is it a sense of too many chefs in the kitchen? You know what happens with that? You get a bouillabaisse and too much salt. So there you go. There you have it. There's my opinion. There's my opinion on if I think it's going to happen. Guess what I need you to do? I need you to share your opinion down below. Those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you like Christopher Nolan as a potential? Do you think it's going to happen? What's your evidence? What's your reason? We'll keep exploring this as things go on because we love a good speculative discussion and a debate. Keeps the old synapse firing. Nothing wrong with it. We're humans. In the meantime, go enjoy yourself out there. This has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.